Breadbox Media programming is brought to you by...
I actually met my wife on CatholicSingles.com, if you can believe that.
Really?
Yes, I had never done that before. Didn't have any problems with dating.
Natalie and Aaron met on CatholicSingles.com after they realized that they needed to find someone who shared their faith. Meet other faithful Catholics on the original Catholic dating site. Download our app today for free. Looking for a way to build daily prayer discipline? Seen the rise in mindfulness meditation, but not sure if it is possible to meditate in a way that's consistent with your Catholic faith? Just looking for a way to breathe new life into your existing prayer routine? No matter what you're looking for, Hallow is here to help. Hallow is a Catholic prayer and meditation app that helps users deepen their relationship with God through audio-guided contemplative prayer sessions. From meditations on the daily gospel to the rosary to daily examens, Hallow has something for everyone. Hallow is the #1 Catholic app in the U.S. It is free to download and has permanently free content, but you can also check out all of the premium sessions for 30 days, risk-free, by signing up at www.hallow.app/breadbox.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Lisa, Hendey, and Friends. So happy this week to be joined by another of my real life friends and someone who's doing remarkable work. Joining us today is Jaymie Stuart Wolfe. And Jaymie is, among other things, she's a very, very accomplished woman, but in today's capacity, she is the editor of a great new book from Ave Maria Press entitled Teachings for an Unbelieving World, Newly Discovered Reflections on Paul's Sermon at the Areopagus by John Paul II. Welcome to the show, Jaymie Stuart Wolfe.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Lisa, even if it's socially distant.
I know. It's so fun to be here. And I have a million things I want to ask you about, but I really want to focus our conversation today on this particular book. I sort of vaguely remember when the concept for this came to you, and it's really a remarkable project that you've had the chance to work on. Tell us a little bit more about how this book came about.
Yeah, you were there actually at the LA Religious Education Congress a couple congresses ago. And, we, as editors, we go there to meet new authors and figure out new projects and see what everybody else is doing and what the pulse of readers really is, where that might be going, what people are looking for. And we also meet with other publishers and other people we may have worked with on various projects throughout the years. And so I always try to make an appointment with the Vatican Publishing House representative because, it's the Vatican Publishing House representative. And, mostly out of respect and just to kind of keep that friendship going, because you never know when you're going to need something from the Vatican, and you always do one time or another. So I made an appointment weeks in advance and went over to the booth and sat down and had a lovely conversation with Fred Giulio, who's just a charming person. And, he was going through his catalog and saying, telling me about what they were publishing and what was upcoming for them. And he turned the page and said, "Oh, and we have this. It's a new work from John Paul." And I just sort of stopped in the chair and sort of time just stopped. And it's a new work from John Paul, from Pope John Paul. How is that even possible? Well, he said, it was found in a drawer.
Yeah, that's so crazy.
Found in a drawer, written while he was Archbishop of Krakow. So we think it was written around 1966, maybe very late 1965. But it's really uncertain. There are things we know about the work and things we don't. But it was a handwritten 39-page manuscript tucked in a drawer for 50 years that was found in Poland, published in its original language, a year and a half before I heard about it, or actually 6 months before I heard about it. And then the Vatican was doing a translation into Italian, and they were going to release it. And strangely enough, English language rights for the work were available. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It's not very often that you have, a prominent, well-loved, holy, deceased author,
saint,
come out with a new book. But that's exactly what it was. It wasn't compiled from other things. It wasn't like somebody went through all of St. John Paul's works and said, oh, let's see what he says about birds, and here's everything St. John Paul said about birds. But it was actually a set of teachings written by St. John Paul at that period of his life. As Archbishop of Krakow, he'd only been Archbishop for a couple of years. And it's an extended meditation or reflection on Acts chapter 17. So it's the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 17, where Paul addresses the cultural and intellectual elite of Athens. And so it's amazing.
The teachings, and I mean, scripturally, we know that they were based in a particular time in the early church. But when you look at kind of the breakdown of what's covered in his writings and the talking points, it's almost like this was written for such a time as this, that so much of this is so timeless. Say a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's very interesting because he wrote this probably, as we said, in 1966. At least that's sort of the forensic evidence for this. But it was shortly after the close of the Second Vatican Council. So it was in what John Paul really kind of considered an evangelical moment, right? So it was written in that moment. But it was also written as he was observing in Poland the 1000th anniversary of Christianity in that country. So it wasn't a joyous celebration countrywide, of course, because you had the Soviet domination of atheistic communism. And so living the faith, proclaiming the faith, sharing the faith was not an easy task in that situation. And so he lived in a world that was, an unbelieving world. There were certainly many faithful Catholics living there and maintaining the faith, but it wasn't easy. And so he wrote this as a series of teachings in that situation. But again, what is the world we live in? It may not be atheistic communism, but it's certainly fallen away from faith. And there's certainly a lot of unbelief and disbelief when it comes to the gospel of Jesus Christ in the world that we live in. And so he has a lot to teach us here about how to approach that world and how to approach it fruitfully, not just faithfully. Faithfully, yes, with the full gospel of Jesus Christ, but also fruitfully in kind of engagement that might lead to faith for other people, or at least present that as a viable option for them.
Jaymie, the book geek in me, the Catholic kind of editorial and reader fan in me wants to kind of better understand your role as editor in the project, and also what it was like to collaborate with two great voices that you brought into the project. The foreword is written by George Weigel, and we have an introduction from Scott Hahn. So what was the date? Like, how do you take a project like this and shape it as editor?
Well, you kind of get in touch with what the importance is of this book, right? I mean, I think if John Paul had scrawled a grocery list, we probably would have an audience interested in reading it. But that's not what this is. This actually has valuable content. And yet it's also historically valuable, right? It's valuable from a historical perspective in terms of when was this written? How does it represent the development of St. John Paul's thinking or articulation, expression of what he thought. And it's remarkably consistent. I mean, it's 12 years before he's standing on that balcony at St. Peter's Square, elected as the next Holy Father. But it's remarkably consistent. And you see in this book a lot of the themes that later show up in his pontificate in kind of miniature form, right? But the job of an editor is to kind of define all the moving pieces and then put them all together. And so that's, what would people want from a book like this? Well, they'd want to know more about the scriptural context. And they'd want to know more about the historical importance of it and where this falls in the work of John Paul. So that's why we went to, I went to George Weigel and to Dr. Scott Hahn for expertise in their areas. And their contributions, honestly, are, sometimes I have to admit, I'm a person who doesn't always read the foreword or the introduction. But in this book, they really contribute to our understanding of what St. John Paul is saying here and its importance, its significance.
What did you personally take away from what you learned of reading the book? As an editor, you spend a lot of time just very immersed in the content and the shaping of a project. But, for you as a person of faith, how did reading this and spending so much time with it impact you personally?
Well, really kind of two ways. I mean, one is content and one is kind of more personal, right? So in that hotel room in Anaheim, when I requested the manuscript be sent to me in languages I didn't read, much Polish and Italian, I opened up an email that came in at 3:00 in the morning. I never do that, but I did that day. I was just too excited. And, it was up in the middle of the night and something just said, check your email. So I opened up that email and saw a scroll through the document in Polish and Italian, whatever, but there it was. Handwritten pages, right, photographs of this manuscript. And I have to tell you, Lisa, at that moment, I really felt that I was encountering St. John Paul right in that hotel room in the middle of the night at 3:00 in the morning. It felt very personal and he felt very present. And it was an interesting kind of encounter. In the community of saints, we're all together. We're all together in Christ. And so time and space and death and life, none of that really blocks anything. But I felt that he was there. And so that was a very personal thing. But in terms of the content of the book, I would say that he says something in this book that is very powerful and maybe some excellent guidance for us as we move back into the world and begin again to preach the gospel and live it. And it's that the people in Athens who rejected the gospel largely considered this encounter of St. Paul in Athens was not considered a success. We don't have a letter to the Athenians to prove that any church had really started there. He won only a few converts. But the reason St. John Paul gives for that is that it had more to do with anthropology than it did to do with theology. In other words, it's the understanding of the human person that kept those very brilliant, culturally developed Athenians from accepting the gospel. And I think we can profit from an awareness of that today, right? I mean, I know I will be looking at what is the understanding of the human person that I might be dealing with or encountering whenever I'm trying to present the gospel in our world, and how does that disconnect maybe affect a person's ability to really hear the invitation of Christ to walk with him?
Did you have a big devotion to St. John Paul II before working on this?
Yeah. Absolutely. I've been carrying that for as long as I've been Catholic. I came into the Catholic Church as a senior in college a few years after witnessing a Mass on Boston Common that was offered by St. John Paul. And it was a profoundly deep experience, despite the fact that I was not Catholic and that it was raining cats and dogs. And it was a very cold October day, but it was a powerful experience. And, St. John Paul had that really great charism of being able to speak to a crowd of 1 million people, and yet each person in that crowd felt that he was speaking directly to them. It was just that kind of an experience. So I think I owe my Catholicism in part to St. John Paul, among a few others. So I feel indebted, that's for sure.
Was there anything that you kind of learned through this that you hadn't known before about him?
Well, I think the consistency of his thought and how systematically he developed so many themes, like about the human being in truth, the human being in freedom, how love is both redemptive and spousal, the Holy Spirit, his prayer life. But I think one thing that we tend to forget about St. John Paul is that he was a council father at the Second Vatican Council. And we sort of forget about that. He was the last council father to sit on the chair of Peter. And he brought all the hopes and aspirations of Vatican II with him. And his job largely in Poland was to implement those things. And then, he kind of took that to the church as a whole. But he was very much a product and a producer of Vatican II. And I think this book really affirms that because he quotes very liberally from the documents.
Beautiful. Now, this is a book that, some people might kind of shy away from something like this, but it's really accessible and really important for all of us as people of faith and people who want to share our faith. Now, Ave is providing a free study guide. How would you suggest maybe that readers embrace this book and use it either in groups or at their parishes or even for independent study?
Oh yeah, I mean, it doesn't read like a philosophic text in most places. There's a few maybe paragraphs that might be a little difficult, but overall it reads more like a Wednesday audience that he would give. And the teachings are really quite brief. So we're talking maybe 1,500 words. That's kind of the length of 2 newspaper columns usually. So it's not difficult actually. It's quite accessible. And we did provide a free study guide. It's downloadable, PDF form off the Ave Maria Press website. And I would take it one teaching at a time. That's what I would do. And he does build, so I'd probably do them in sequence. But I'd do it one at a time and just kind of mull it over. And the questions that we've prepared in the study guide are really not intellectual reading comprehension questions. It's kind of more a deeper reading, but also some personal engagement. Where do you see this in your life? Where could you? And so it is very usable for groups as well as individual study. And, I've been giving some video teachings of using that study guide on Saturday mornings as well. So those videos should be up there at some point for everyone to see it whenever it's convenient. We're trying to bring the teaching to everyone because I think it really was meant for everyone, and especially today as we contemplate the next step in evangelization.
Well, beautiful. Jaymie, I'm so grateful for your work on this and just for all you've done to inspire me with your work. And I just imagine that someday, hopefully a long time from now, when you get up to heaven, St. John Paul II, they're thanking you and saying, well done on doing the press for my for my book as well.
Right? Thanks for bringing it to English, right?
Good job on that, Jaymie. So
he loved us all so deeply, right? So it's and this year is 2020 is the 100th anniversary of his birth, and so I kind of feel like this book is his birthday present to the rest of us.
That's beautiful. Well, Jaymie Stuart Wolfe, thank you so much. Any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
The saints are real and they engage with us, and this project may be proof of that for me. But it's also, you look for it in your own life, where the saints are speaking to you, where they're praying for you, where they're leading you, and receive the gifts they have to offer you.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you for your friendship and for your work on this book.
Well, thank you, Lisa.
God bless. Well, friends, that is it for this week's episode of Lisa Hendey and Friends. I do want to encourage you to head over to AveMariaPress.com, where you'll be able to locate Teachings for an Unbelieving World, this beautiful new resource, and all of the details that we discussed about extra pieces that can go with that as accompaniment for your use of it. We'll have links for all of that in our show notes, and definitely you want to check out Jaymie Stuart Wolfe and her work as well. She's a very talented writer and speaker too. And we'll have all that over at my website, along with all of our previous episodes and places that you can find me on social media. That's lisahendey.com. I want to thank you for listening this week and for all of your encouragement. I hope you have an awesome day. God bless.
Looking for exceptional coffee delivered fresh to your door? We have the answer. Our friends at Grim Bean Coffee produce small batch artisan coffee using top-tier coffee beans. The coffee is roasted when you order guaranteeing the freshest coffee possible. Check out Breadbox Roasts, a new line of Catholic-themed coffees available at www.grimbeancoffee.com/Breadbox Media. Experience coffee like never before.